What's up, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, coming to you live once again from Spreaker.com, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Not on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast YouTube channel live, as I have been the last few weeks, and I've really enjoyed that. It's really allowed me to grow the YouTube page to the best of my ability, but my laptop is kind of weird right now, so I'm hopping back from the laptop to audio back and forth, and we'll get that issue fixed in no time. But I can still do this podcast. I can still make things happen and still get my content out there for the listeners to listen to and for the viewers to view. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the support, as always. Plenty of Buffalo Bills coverage coming up as well throughout the next few weeks, as well as mixed martial arts, Major League Baseball, hockey, you name it. Rooting for the Capitals, believe it or not. Some people are like, wow, why are you rooting for the Capitals? Ovechkin's a doucher. That might be true, but the guy deserves a Stanley Cup. I mean, he's one of the best players of all time, in my personal opinion, and he's had a really good career. So if Sid the Kid wins 1 or 2 or 3, however many he's got, I'd like Ovechkin to get at least 1. You know, that would be nice. So that being said, we got some news inside the sport of mixed martial arts that is not really news to me. And I broke a story on this podcast, BJPenn.com's Chris Taylor, who's actually a really good buddy of mine. We communicate via Twitter, a lot in the wide world of MMA. He's offered me to be on his show. I've offered him to be on mine. We haven't set that up yet. We haven't made that happen. But Chris Taylor tweeted out, a couple months ago that Chuck Liddell was really close to signing the most lucrative deal in Bellator history, which would have amounted to $10 million for his comeback fight. $10 million. You want to talk about a lot of money? George St. Pierre in his comeback fight versus Michael Bisping made $8 million. So Chuck Liddell at 48 years old would be getting a pay raise in comparison to GSP, who, spent 4 years outside the sport. Liddell spent around 8 years outside the sport. So, that was huge news, and it fluttered out there fairly quickly. It was rumored that Bellator offered Chuck Liddell the Chael Sonnen fight not once but twice, and the fight negotiations just broke down. Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour asked Chuck Liddell this very question, and Chuck denied that the fight was ever offered. Then Chael comes on the show and says the fight was offered twice. But now there's a new guy throwing his hat into the ring, throwing his hat into the octagon, I should say, and that is boxing legend Oscar De La Hoya of Golden Boy Promotions. Golden Boy Boxing is one of the biggest boxing promotions in the world today. Obviously, Canelo Alvarez, Gennady Golovkin was brought to us by that promotion in conjunction with Triple G and all that stuff. And Oscar De La Hoya is looking to start Golden Boy MMA, which is a MMA organization, obviously only MMA, that, Oscar De La Hoya wants to throw his hat into the octagon and create his own UFC Bellator league, which is very interesting for a wide variety of reasons, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But what is most interesting about that news is that the first fight that Oscar De La Hoya says, that's the fight I gotta make, is a fight between a 48-year-old Chuck Liddell and a 42, pushing 43-year-old Tito Ortiz. Now, I understand this business very well. As far as when you're a new promotion, you want to bring eyes to your sport, you have to bring eyes to your sport any which way possible. If that means putting a 48-year-old legend versus a 43-year-old MMA legend in the octagon together for a trilogy fight, that's what they got to do. They have no fighters on the roster. They have no agreement set with Chuck or Tito. The only thing they have is an idea. And the idea is to create a fight with two fighters that have fought twice before that are the two and I say this, willingly say this, the two reasons why MMA is where it is today, Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, that rivalry will stand the test of time, will be regarded as one of the best rivalries ever, if not the best rivalry ever. And putting those two guys in any cage to fight each other, people will watch it. There's no doubt about that. It's just the reality that we are tied to these guys at the hip due to the fact that we realize as fans that they're the reason why the sport is where it is today. So for all the people that say, well, I won't watch that garbage, that an old guy versus an old guy, take it from me, I was somebody that was so against Floyd Mayweather fighting Conor McGregor, I thought it was the dumbest idea ever. Said I wasn't going to watch the fight. I watched the fight, and it was one of my favorite fights ever. And furthermore, the spectacle was one of the best spectacles I've ever seen prior to any fight. So much that I enjoyed it so much that I went to Toronto for the press conference in Toronto on the Maymac World Press Tour. So I'm not going to say anymore, oh, this fight's dumb, I won't watch it, and you shouldn't either. Based on that fact alone, in my life, I said, hey, this fight's dumb, this fight shouldn't happen, and I soaked it up. I ate it up like spaghetti. So, do I want to see these guys fight? Do I feel like these guys need to fight? No. And I don't. Obviously, they've been gone. Chuck's been gone for 8 years. Tito's been gone for about a year. A little over a year now. Do they have to fight? No. Would I watch it? Hell yeah, I'd watch it. You kidding me? Of course I'd watch it. So, Chuck also threw out there that the one guy that he'd come back to fight would be Tito, but if Tito couldn't for some reason again, Chael Sonnen would be of interest. Well, Chael's signed with Bellator. He's got, I believe, a 6-fight deal with Bellator. He's already fought halfway through that. He's got another fight against Fedor. If he gets through Fedor, then he's fighting for the Bellator Heavyweight Championship. If he gets through that and he's the Bellator Heavyweight Champion, that is 5 fights. So he'd have 1 fight left. He fought Tito. He fought Vanderlei. He fought Rampage. He'd fight Fedor. Then he'd fight the winner of Bader versus Mitrione. And then he'd have another fight left on his contract. I don't know Bellator that well, but could you imagine if Chael Sonnen somehow, some way won this tournament, which is very possible? If he somehow, some way won this tournament on the last fight of his Bellator contract was a heavyweight title defense versus Chuck Liddell, what world would we be living in? It would be straight out of Grudge match with Sylvester Stallone and Robert De Niro. I mean, the guys aren't that old, but they're getting up there. But if they still feel like they want to fight, they feel like they need to make some money, and in fairness, something that is not talked about enough, and this has been talked about for a long time, the fact that Chuck Liddell has wanted to come out of retirement. So that's why I said from the top, this isn't new news to me, because Chuck has talked about this dating back to 2013, 2012. Something needs to be stated about this is that Dana White made a promise to Chuck Liddell that he would have a lifetime job working for the UFC once the Fertittas sold the company to WME-IMG. That job was just poof, gone. Chuck Liddell and Matt Hughes had cushiony desk jobs with the UFC under the Zuffa Fertitta brothers ownership. Once those guys sold the company, their jobs went kapoof. And these guys need to make money. And this is all that they know how to do. You can only do so many autograph appearances. You can only do many T-shirt signings or fan expos or whatever you want to call it. Money is money in fighting, and companies, upstart companies like Golden Boy MMA and the resurgent Bellator MMA with Scott Coker are offering Chuck Liddell a lot of money to fight. He would almost be dumb not to take it in that regard. Because in Chuck Liddell's era, he wasn't making the Conor McGregor money. He wasn't making the Ronda Rousey money. He wasn't making the George St. Pierre money. He wasn't making the John Jones money. And now he has a chance to dip his toes back in the water and do that. More power to him. Sincerely, more power to him. Chuck said maybe he'd fight Tito, then he'd fight Chael, and then that would lead to John Jones, which I don't know how that will happen. He would have to fight in the UFC. John is under contract to the UFC. But it sure got my attention. That's a bold statement by Chuck Liddell to make that statement. And that is not new news either, because he has called out John Jones a time or two. It's almost as if Chuck Liddell has finally realized you only live once. YOLO, YOLO, YOLO. Let's do this. Let's go. Let's get ready. And for as many people that can say this is a joke, that Chuck Liddell wants to get back in there, I'm sure they would not fight Chuck Liddell. Whether he's 48, 58, 68, 78, 88, I know I wouldn't want to fight him. Take care, everybody. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take. My thoughts on the comeback of Chuck the Iceman Liddell.